5:47 a.m., October 14th, Pennington County, South Dakota. The gravel road leading to the Hartwell Creek property cuts through 43 miles of open prairie before arriving at a gate bearing a hand-painted sign, Hartwell Heritage Livestock. Established 1987. In the pre-dawn darkness, the ranch looks like exactly what it claims to be. Weathered red barns, a grain silo with peeling white paint, 3 livestock trailers parked in careful formation near the east paddock, cattle visible in the distance moving slowly in the cold morning air. It looks like America. It is not America. At precisely 5:47 a.m., 41 federal agents, a coordinated joint task force comprising FBI special agents from the Rapid City Field Office and ICE Homeland Security Investigations personnel operating under the Department of Homeland Security, breached the property across 3 simultaneous entry points. Tactical units moved through the main residence. The secondary structure identified in aerial surveillance as the operations building, and the largest barn, designated in warrant documentation as Target Structure Alpha. The ranch's owner, Gerald Raymond Hartwell, 58, of Rapid City, South Dakota. Former county commissioner, 3-time recipient of the South Dakota Agricultural Excellence Award, and registered Republican precinct captain for Pennington County's 14th district. Was located in the kitchen. He was making coffee. He was dressed for church. He was placed under arrest before his cup was full. What agents found? The agents who entered Target Structure Alpha were not expecting what they found inside. The barn's exterior was consistent with active livestock use. Fresh bedding, agricultural equipment, the smell of animals and diesel fuel, but behind a reinforced interior wall, a wall that did not appear on any municipal building permit filed with Pennington County. Federal agents discovered a climate-controlled operational space spanning approximately 2,400 square feet. Inside, 37 commercial-grade computer terminals arranged in workstation clusters. Server infrastructure that HSI technical analysts would later estimate at a replacement value of approximately $2.1 million. 17 encrypted satellite uplink terminals. A dedicated fiber optic connection running underground to a relay station located 4.2 miles north of the property. A relay station registered to a shell company incorporated in Delaware in March of 2019. The accounts accessed from those terminals, according to the federal affidavit filed in the United States District Court for the District of South Dakota, processed more than $1.6 billion in fraudulent transactions across a period of approximately 6 years. $1.6 billion, moving through accounts at financial institutions in 47 states and 11 foreign jurisdictions. Processed in part from a cattle ranch in Pennington County, South Dakota, by a man who gave speeches at local 4-H competitions and served 2 consecutive terms advising the county on agricultural zoning. This is how it worked. The architecture of the fraud. To understand the scale of what Gerald Hartwell built, you must first understand what he was selling. Beginning in approximately 2017, according to federal prosecutors, Hartwell and a network of co-conspirators began operating what investigators characterize in charging documents as a multi-layered synthetic identity fraud and money laundering enterprise. The operation exploited structural vulnerabilities in the agricultural lending sector. Specifically, the federally subsidized loan programs administered through the USDA Farm Service Agency and the Small Business Administration's Rural Development Portfolio. The mechanics were precise and methodical. Hartwell's network generated synthetic identities, constructed individuals built from combinations of real Social Security numbers, and fabricated credit histories and fraudulent documentation. And used those identities to apply for agricultural business loans, USDA emergency relief grants, and rural enterprise development funding across dozens of jurisdictions simultaneously. The applications were sophisticated. They included detailed farm business plans, fabricated equipment inventories, falsified land valuations, and doctored tax filings that appeared, on initial review, entirely legitimate. Many passed that initial review. The fraudulent loan applications, prosecutors allege, generated approximately $890 million in direct government and federally backed disbursements over the 6-year period. Those funds moved through a web of 43 shell entities, limited liability companies, and agricultural partnerships incorporated across South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Delaware, and Nevada. before being layered through cryptocurrency exchanges, commercial real estate transactions, and international wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Malta, and Belize. The remaining $710 million, according to the affidavit, derived from a secondary criminal enterprise operating in parallel. A large-scale document fraud network that manufactured fraudulent agricultural export certifications, fraudulent USDA inspection documents, and counterfeit certificates of origin for international commodity shipments. HSI investigators, working in coordination with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, identified fraudulent export documentation linked to the network across 18 major agricultural export shipments originating from Midwest processing facilities. This was not a small operation. This was not opportunism. This was infrastructure. The network. Gerald Hartwell did not build this alone. By the time federal warrants were executed on October 14th, the investigation, internally designated Operation Hollow Harvest and running continuously since a tip originated with the USDA Office of Inspector General in February 2021, had identified 22 individuals as subjects of criminal investigation. 8 were arrested in coordinated actions on the morning of October 14th. Arrests occurred simultaneously in Rapid City, Sioux Falls, Minneapolis, Phoenix, and suburban Atlanta. Among those taken into custody alongside Hartwell, Martin Voss, 61, a licensed certified public accountant based in Sioux Falls whose firm had filed financial documentation for 9 of the 43 shell entities identified by investigators. Rena Caldwell, 44, a former loan officer at a regional agricultural bank in Watertown, South Dakota, who prosecutors allege approved a minimum of 37 fraudulent loan applications over a 4-year period in exchange for payments totaling approximately $1.4 million routed through an LLC registered in her mother's name. And Travis Ohlendorf, 37, a logistics coordinator whose employer, Ina Zweis, a legitimate agricultural trucking firm based in Mitchell, South Dakota, was entirely unaware that Ohlendorf had been processing fraudulent shipping documentation from a personal laptop in his company vehicle for approximately 30 months. Almost 14 additional individuals remain subjects of ongoing investigation. Federal prosecutors in the District of South Dakota declined to comment on the status of those investigations. A spokesperson for the FBI's Rapid City field office confirmed only that the scope of the enterprise extends beyond the individuals currently charged. That statement should give you pause. The victims. Investigations of this nature, when they involve complex financial fraud against government programs, sometimes obscure the human dimension of the crime behind the technical complexity of the scheme. The dollar figures are staggering. The procedural mechanics are elaborate. It is easy to lose sight of what the money represents and who bears the cost. Federal prosecutors did not lose sight. Impact statements filed in connection with the initial charging documents include testimony from legitimate farm operators in South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa who were denied USDA emergency relief funding during drought conditions in 2022 and 2023, funding that federal investigators believe was redirected by the Hartwell network through compromised disbursement processing channels. Small operations, family farms carrying third-generation debt. Farmers who submitted legitimate applications and received denial letters while synthetic identities constructed in a climate-controlled room behind a false barn wall received approvals. One statement filed by a wheat farmer from Beadle County, South Dakota, describes the forced sale of 340 acres of land that had been in his family since 1931. The denial of emergency operating funds he applied for in the spring of 2022, he wrote, came without explanation and left us with no option we hadn't already tried. He did not know that the program he applied to had been systematically compromised. He knows now. How it stayed hidden. For nearly 4 years, Operation Hollow Harvest proceeded without public acknowledgement. The investigation began, according to documents obtained through federal court filings, when a USD AOIG analyst in Kansas City flagged an anomaly in disbursement pattern data from the FSA loan portfolio. The anomaly was subtle. A cluster of loan applications originating from overlapping IP address ranges, filed on behalf of entities incorporated within a compressed time window, bearing documentation that showed statistically improbable consistency in formatting and language across what should have been independently submitted applications. The analyst elevated the concern. It was assigned to a joint OIG and FBI investigative unit. The unit, working quietly and without disruption to Hartwell's ongoing operation, spent 14 months mapping the shell entity network before making first contact with financial institution compliance officers. It spent an additional 11 months tracing the cryptocurrency conversion pathways and identifying the international accounts. The decision to delay physical action on the property until October 14th was deliberate. Investigators needed the operation to continue running long enough to build an evidentiary record that was, in the words of the lead FBI affidavit, comprehensive and irreversible. They needed to map not only the financial architecture, but the human network, the accountants, the loan officers, the logistics facilitators, the document manufacturers, to a degree of certainty that would survive a sophisticated legal defense. What they built over 44 months of investigation was a case file exceeding 340,000 pages of documentation, financial records, communications logs, server data, surveillance materials, and the records of a network that believed its geographic isolation and surface legitimacy made it untouchable. The server infrastructure recovered from Target Structure Alpha on October 14th contained, according to the forensic summary filed by FBI digital forensics personnel, approximately 2.3 terabytes of transaction records, communication logs, and identity fabrication templates. The templates alone, structured files used to generate synthetic identity documentation packages, numbered in excess of 14,000 individual records. Each template represents a fraudulent identity. Many of those identities were used more than once. The press conference. At 2:15 p.m. on October 14th, U.S. Attorney Sandra Molina, speaking from the federal courthouse in Rapid City, delivered a prepared statement. Her language was careful and precise. She described the charges: wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and aggravated identity theft. She noted that the investigation had required extraordinary coordination across multiple federal agencies and financial intelligence units. She acknowledged the USDA Office of Inspector General, HSI, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She described the defendant as an individual who deliberately weaponized the public trust inherent in his community, standing to insulate a sophisticated criminal enterprise from detection. She did not use the word betrayal. She did not need to. When a reporter asked whether the investigation had revealed vulnerabilities in federal agricultural lending systems that remained unaddressed, Molina paused before responding. The investigation has generated findings that have been referred to the appropriate oversight bodies, she said. Those findings are not part of this proceeding, but they are not being ignored. Read that carefully. The aftermath. Gerald Hartwell appeared before Magistrate Judge Thomas Erickson on the afternoon of October 15th. He entered no plea. His attorney, a partner at a criminal defense firm in Denver, requested a continuance for bail determination. The request was denied. Hartwell was remanded to federal custody. In the days following the arrests, residents of Pennington County spoke to local media with a kind of stunned bewilderment that is familiar to anyone who has covered the collapse of public trust in a small, tight community. He coached youth baseball. He sponsored the county fair's livestock auction for 11 consecutive years. He was present at every community event, every crisis, every celebration. He was also, for 6 years, operating one of the most elaborate agricultural fraud enterprises documented in the Northern Plains region of the United States. The two things are not contradictions. They are the architecture. The community standing was not incidental to the crime. It was load-bearing. What remains? The case against Hartwell and his co-defendants is proceeding toward trial. Federal prosecutors have indicated they will seek sentences consistent with the scope and duration of the fraud. Given the dollar figures involved and the number of aggravating factors documented in the charging materials, legal analysts familiar with federal sentencing guidelines have suggested exposure in excess of 20 years for the primary defendants. The shell entity network remains partially active, according to HSI officials, because dismantling it without prematurely alerting remaining subjects requires a sequenced approach. 14 individuals, as of this writing, have not been charged. The investigation is continuing. The barn on the Hartwell Creek property has been secured as a federal evidence site. The cattle in the East Paddock, legitimate animals in an illegitimate place, were transferred to county care. The 43 miles of gravel road leading to that property still looks like exactly what it always appeared to be. That is precisely the point. Somewhere right now, in a structure that looks unremarkable, in a place that draws no attention, someone is doing this again. Maybe not at this scale, maybe not yet, but the structural vulnerabilities that made Operation Hollow Harvest possible, the gaps between application and verification, between documentation and scrutiny, between public persona and private operation, those gaps have not closed. They have been reported. They have been referred. They are, we are told, not being ignored.